The untold story of Whitney Houston's one daughter. A lone spotlight flickers over an empty stage. The air hums with silence, the kind that follows thunder. Somewhere in the dark, her voice, that voice, still soars, as if the walls themselves remember the sound. Whitney Houston could fill a stadium with sound, but at home, away from the roar, there were quieter roles. Daughter, wife, mother. Roles the cameras never quite understood. And in the center of it all was one little girl, a child born into a kingdom of fame she never asked to rule, yet one she could never leave. Her name would follow her for the rest of her life, but so would the shadows cast by her mother's spotlight. Whitney The Beginning. Whitney Elizabeth Houston is born on August 9, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, at a time when the city is both vibrant and fraying at the edges. Newark streets hum with the rhythm of gospel, soul, and doo-wop. On Sundays, the music pours out of church doors like light spilling onto cracked sidewalks, the air thick with organ chords and hand claps. Her mother, Cissy Houston, is a gospel powerhouse whose voice can shake a sanctuary. Her cousins, Dion and Dee Dee Warwick, are already charting hits, giving Whitney a living example that dreams can leave the church pew and fill the world. In the Houston household, music isn't a hobby, it's oxygen. Family dinners are followed by harmonies around the piano. Even the arguments sometimes end with someone singing. Whitney learns early that songs can carry things, words alone cannot. By age 11, she's singing in the New Hope Baptist Church choir, her small frame nearly hidden behind the pulpit, her voice impossibly clear. She doesn't just hit the note, she inhabits it. The congregation listens in a kind of stillness reserved for rare moments. As a teenager, she models, records background vocals, and absorbs every nuance from the legends around her. Aretha Franklin, Chaka Khan, her own mother. It's an informal apprenticeship that no school could offer, a crash course in stagecraft and survival. In 1983, at just 19, she's singing in a smoky New York nightclub when Clive Davis hears her. His expression says it all. This is not just a singer. This is someone who will redefine what a pop ballad can be. The record deal follows, but so does something larger, the awareness that her voice will not just carry her forward, it will become the voice of a generation. The Rise. Whitney's debut album, released in 1985, doesn't just land, it detonates. The opening notes of Saving All My Love for You become a kind of calling card, the way strangers will remember where they were the first time they heard her. How Will I Know dances across MTV, bright and youthful, while Greatest Love of All cements her as a voice with gravity, a singer who can lift a lyric into something like scripture. She becomes the first woman to have her debut album debut at #1 on the Billboard 200. Awards flood in, Grammys, American Music Awards, platinum plaques. She's no longer just Whitney from Newark. She's Whitney Houston, the voice. But there's a strange truth to the altitude she's reached. The air gets thinner. Every public smile is expected to be flawless. Every performance has to outdo the last. The industry doesn't simply reward her talent. It demands it on command, as if brilliance were a faucet she could turn on without exhaustion. By the early 90s, her world is a carousel of stages, hotel rooms, and endless flights. At night, after the roar of applause fades, there are quiet moments in penthouse suites where she stares out at cities she doesn't have time to know. The glamour is real, but so is the loneliness that slips in between encores. And yet, she keeps rising. When she takes on the Star-Spangled Banner at the 1991 Super Bowl, her rendition becomes a cultural touchstone. So pure, so effortless, it's replayed during national crises as a reminder of unity. Whitney is no longer just a pop star. She's a voice woven into America's emotional memory. It's in this atmosphere, half gold-plated dream, half relentless treadmill, that she steps into the next chapter of her life. A chapter that will bring both love and the kind of complications that no amount of talent can smooth over. Love and Collision. In 1992, Whitney marries Bobbi Brown. To the public, it's a pairing of opposites, America's pop princess and R&B's rebellious bad boy. The media fixates on every glance, every argument, every reconciliation. They write about them as if the marriage is a tabloid soap opera, but behind closed doors it's far more complex. Equal parts, devotion, volatility, and the stubborn belief that love can survive anything. Whitney speaks often of Bobby's charm, his energy, the way he makes her laugh when the pressure becomes too much. But there are also storms, fights that stretch into the early hours, the friction of two people living in the glare of constant judgment, and the undercurrent of substance abuse that begins to shadow them both. That same year, The Bodyguard turns Whitney into not just a singer, but a box office star. I Will Always Love You smashes records, selling over 20 million copies worldwide, becoming the best-selling single by a female artist in history. She is now the most famous woman in music, celebrated on every continent. But fame doesn't slow the ticking clock at home. In March 1993, their only child arrives, Bobbi Kristina. She's born into a life already scripted by the public's gaze. For Whitney, motherhood feels like an anchor in a life of constant motion, a reminder that even the brightest spotlight can't compete with the glow of holding your child for the first time. Bobbi Kristina Brown, 1993 to 2015. March 4th, 1993. The world greets Bobbi Kristina like a new royal. Reporters camp outside the hospital. Her first baby photos are splashed across magazines, her face already part of a public narrative. Her earliest memories are stitched from velvet couches in Beverly Hills, endless travel days, and nights spent just out of reach of the stage lights. She is adored by her parents, but the chaos of their marriage bleeds into her childhood. Luxury cannot soften the sound of arguments through hotel walls. As she grows, she becomes her mother's shadow, trailing through dressing rooms, rehearsals, and photo shoots. She learns the rhythm of her mother's world, the rush to the stage, the quiet after the crowd, the late-night phone calls that end in tears. When her parents split, she clings to Whitney, protector, confidant, best friend. But adolescence brings its own storms, tabloid rumors, pressure to live up to the family name, and a front-row seat to her mother's public struggles with addiction. In February 2012, the unthinkable happens. Whitney is found unresponsive in a Beverly Hills hotel bathtub. At 18, Bobbi Kristina is thrust into a grief so vast it seems to hollow her out from the inside. Friends describe her as moving through life like she's underwater, visible but unreachable. She tries to keep going. Reality TV appearances, music projects, but grief becomes a constant undertow. She moves in with Nick Gordon, a relationship that brings as much controversy as comfort. On January 31st, 2015, she is found face down in a bathtub in her Georgia home. She remains in a coma for nearly 6 months, passing away on July 26th at just 22 years old. The echo of her mother's death is impossible to ignore. The echo. Whitney's voice still threads through time, in wedding playlists, movie soundtracks, and karaoke nights where strangers reach for those impossible high notes. Bobbi Kristina's image lives in photographs that freeze her forever in youth before the world became too heavy to carry. Their story is not neatly packaged. It doesn't resolve into a lesson or a happy ending. It is a duet, one voice that reached the whole world, the other barely given the chance. If this story stayed with you, share it, not for the fame, not for the headlines, but for the reminder that even the brightest lights cast shadows, and in those shadows are the people who loved them most, the ones who carried the weight no audience could see. Remember Whitney for the way her voice could lift a room to its feet, and remember Bobbi Kristina for the way she tried, quietly, stubbornly, to find her own melody in a world that only wanted her to sing her mother's. If you know someone who seems to be fading under the weight of their own expectations, reach for them, check in, ask twice. Sometimes the smallest act of care is enough to keep a story from ending too soon. Legacies aren't just the awards or the records. They're the conversations we start, the compassion we choose, and the love we keep alive long after the final curtain falls.